The U.S. Navy says its blockade of Iran is costing Tehran $500 million every single day. Trump says Iran is collapsing financially. But the real story is more complicated. Because despite the blockade, ships are still getting through. Iran's shadow fleet is still moving oil. And tensions across the Persian Gulf continue threatening the global economy. This is not a total shutdown. It is economic warfare. And both sides believe the other will break first. The blockade began after peace talks collapsed earlier this year. The United States deployed warships, surveillance aircraft, and boarding teams across the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz. The goal was simple: cut off Iran's oil exports and force Tehran back into negotiations. But enforcing a blockade is harder than it sounds. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the busiest shipping routes on Earth. Thousands of vessels move through the region, making perfect enforcement almost impossible. That is where Iran's shadow fleet matters. For years, Iran has built networks designed to bypass sanctions. Tankers operate under foreign flags, ownership is hidden through shell companies, and ships often disable tracking systems during transfers at sea. Oil is moved quietly between vessels before heading toward buyers, mostly in Asia. So while the blockade has damaged Iran's economy, it has not completely stopped exports. And rising oil prices have also helped Iran survive. Because even if Tehran exports fewer barrels, each barrel becomes more valuable during a crisis. That is why analysts say the blockade is hurting Iran, but not breaking it. At the center of this struggle is Karg Island, Iran's main oil export terminal. Most Iranian crude passes through it. U.S. officials believe storage pressure could eventually force Iran to reduce production if exports slow further. But Iran prepared for sanctions and blockades long before this crisis began. Alternative trade routes, floating storage systems, and smuggling networks were already in place. And Tehran is applying pressure too. Iran has threatened shipping routes through the Strait of Hormuz and warned that any escalation could disrupt one of the world's most important energy choke points. That matters globally. A huge percentage of the world's oil and natural gas moves through the strait every day. If the route closes completely again, fuel prices could surge worldwide within days. That is why governments across Europe and Asia are watching this crisis so carefully. Because this is no longer just a US-Iran conflict. It is a global economic risk. There is also another reality history has shown repeatedly. Naval blockades do not always force surrender. Countries under pressure often adapt instead of collapsing. And Iran has spent years preparing for exactly this type of confrontation. At the same time, the blockade creates pressure on the United States as well. Higher oil prices increase inflation, shipping costs, and political tension worldwide. And the longer this standoff continues, the harder it becomes for either side to claim victory. Right now, 3 outcomes appear possible. First, a negotiated settlement that eases restrictions and stabilizes shipping routes. Second, major escalation if diplomacy collapses completely. And third, a long-term standoff where both sides continue pressuring each other economically for months or even years. That third scenario may be the most realistic, because neither side appears ready to back down. The United States believes economic pressure can force concessions. Iran believes it can outlast the pressure long enough to weaken international support for the blockade. So the crisis continues. The blockade is real. The economic damage is real. But Iran's ability to adapt is real too. And that is why this situation remains so dangerous. Because when both sides believe they can outlast the other, conflicts like this can continue far longer than anyone expects.